Record, perfect, okay. We will share the screen, okay. So, as Ethel-G mentioned, because there's only a couple of us, we can keep this informal and we'll leave it a little bit open. So if you guys want to ask me any questions in between, as Ethel-G said, I'm board certified in both internal medicine and pediatrics. So I love just, seeing everything from little newborns to, our elderly population. And so really it's the same health and it's the same issues. So I did recently complete a lifestyle medicine board certification. And in that, it's what I wanted to share are the 6 steps to a healthy you. So that is, oh, hold on, there we go. One of the things I wanted to start with is looking at, kind of leading causes of death. And so we some of you, you may be familiar, I'm not sure what your backgrounds are, but as we progress further and further, back in the day, the cause of death were things that were beyond our control. It was, communicable diseases, viruses. We didn't have great medical technology, but now, as we become more and more advanced, the leading cause of death and the leading cause of disease are actually factors that we have complete control over. So, tobacco, poor diet, physical activity, alcohol consumption are the top actual causes of death. And so, which is really remarkable. And this is why now more than ever, going back to our basics is very, very important. The pillars of lifestyle medicine. So there are 6 main pillars, and they really focus on these things that we all, we know these things. It's just putting them into habits. So the first and the most important, I would say, is our diet. And it's really adopting a whole foods, plant-based diet. The next one is physical activity, as we're doing with the Healthathon. So really increasing your physical activity. The third pillar is sleep. The fourth is our stress. The fifth is, really actually things that we don't traditionally talk about in medicine are things of forming and maintaining healthy relationships, that along with the stress. And then last but not least is stopping tobacco and other unhealthy habits. So again, these are, eat plants. It's just easy things. Eat plants, keep moving, sleep well, be present, stay calm, and love people. So simple, yet sometimes so tough to do. So why has this become so difficult? I think, as we all know, the Western diet is very different from our traditional Indian diet. We have a sedentary lifestyle. The stress just keeps going up. The amount of things on our to-do list, activities, kids, juggling work, families, not sleeping. We definitely don't make time for relationships. And then people, especially, children and young people are not armed with good coping skills. So the traditional Indian lifestyle, most of it, it's plant-based, so mostly vegetarian with a lot of legumes, pulses, vegetables. Our diet inherently does not have any processed sugar or processed foods. And then physical activity, our daily life, walking, getting around place to place, made everyone just active in general without even having to try things such as yoga, pranayama. All those things are part of normal active lifestyle. And then sleep, as we all know with technology and devices, we do not listen to our body's own circadian rhythm. So generally people used to go to bed, shortly after the sun went down. And so all of these simple things we've moved very far away from. Oops. The other thing is that, managing stress, things like maintaining relationships. So traditionally living in large extended families with lots of help. So here it's very much the nuclear family, having to raise children, work, do everything on our own. Traditionally Indian lifestyle is lots of festivals together, family, and then, habits such as tobacco, alcohol, drug use is not really seen in the traditional Indian lifestyle. So I want to go to our plant-based pillar 1, the most important. So as we talked about, the traditional Indian diet is actually very, very healthy, limited amounts of dairy, mostly whole wheat, grains, rice, millet, bajra, and legumes. And so this is what a traditional diet, and as we know, we have moved away far from it. So one of the things is I was born and raised in the States. And so it was interesting for me to see the shift in the diet, even from my parents when they came, because in the 80s and 90s, a lot of people who come from India, a lot of these processed and sugary foods, it was not available. And in a lot of countries, it's like a status of having those foods. And so here, really moving to this easy, not a lot of work, processed breads and snacks and all of this, portion size, dairy, all of these has happened. And we really are now seeing the medical effects of it. So we have seen medically, there's a huge increase in diabetes, central obesity, so obesity around the abdomen, something called metabolic syndrome. So it means that your sugar level is impaired, your cholesterol, you have a very unhealthy cholesterol profile where you have your bad cholesterol, your LDL is quite high, and the healthy cholesterol, your HDL is low, and we see a huge increase in heart disease. So, it's crazy because people think, well, Indians tend to be thinner or be leaner, have a lower BMI, but it's important to know that Indians inherently have an increased risk of diabetes. And even with a lower weight, they will have more heart disease and diabetes compared to a Caucasian or another race individual of the same weight. So that's why the diet and what we consume is so, so important. Here's another, there's many medical journals that discuss this is the risk of diabetes for Asian Americans. And if you look at it, this is now, excuse me, this is not taking into consideration, this is all of the age, sex, BMI, education. So putting that all aside, almost a 3-fold increase in diabetes. So this is a real issue. The amount of diabetes amongst Indians in the United States is a staggering, and it's projected to even increase. So important things, there's been things that white rice is substituted for whole grains. There's, like I mentioned, an overconsumption of refined carbohydrates. This is a huge one, a lot of omega-6. So omega-6 is not actually a healthy oil. So it's much healthier to be an omega-3. And so there's a lot of the really hydrogenated vegetable oils that we're seeing being used. And then obviously the fried food and processed foods. So I often get, is being vegetarian enough? Now, I don't want to, alarm. I think a lot of people feel making a drastic jump or something to completely vegan or plant-based is tough. But I do want to bring these sorts of things up. I would get a lot of patients that would say, well, how do you get your calcium? How do you get enough protein? We have to think about just because we're vegetarian doesn't make us healthy. It's about what we choose. So there are a lot of vegetarians that a lot of their consumption is a lot of processed grain, refined flours, and even being vegetarian, they're not eating high amounts of vegetables or fruit. There's often a high intake of cheese, ice cream, milk, cream. In fact, dairy is the highest source of cholesterol. So we think it's from meat, right? So people who have high cholesterol go to their doctor and say, oh, you need to cut out red meat, you need to cut out beef. Well, honestly, it's dairy, milk, ice cream, cheese. It's the highest source of saturated fat and cholesterol. So it's important to just be aware of some of these. Another thing, so plant protein versus animal protein. Another thing, when I first came to the States or when growing up here, and people would say, well, how do you get your protein if you're vegetarian? How do you get enough protein if you don't eat meat? And this is another myth I want to tell people is that, the amount of protein they say people need, like they say per your kilogram weight, you should have 1 gram of protein, which is actually way, way too much. So we don't actually need that much protein. So I know this slide is a little small, but the average person consumes 80 grams of protein per day. So we do not need that much protein. In fact, that can have kind of deleterious effects on our body. And if you can see here, there's many plant proteins that have significant amount of protein. The thing is that you do have to eat quite a bit, right? So a cup of black beans. And the other thing is that when we think about, let's say we eat, a standard Indian meal that has, if you're eating like roti and you're eating a vegetable and you're eating dal, generally like kids, they're having very little, this much dal, they're having a little bit of the vegetable, and then you're having a lot of roti and rice. So it's really focusing on what proteins we're eating, looking at things like peas, baked potatoes, spinach, even broccoli has a high amount of protein per amount. Just another thing of note, a lot of the things that go through the school and the dietary association, they talk about how much people should have, right? So it's crazy. In the 70s, the bulk of your diet was said to be, you should be eating mostly breads and grains. And then yes, some vegetables, then some dairy, and then you have a small amount of sweets. This was even there in the 80s and early 90s when I was in school, and we would be taught this food pyramid. It's shifted quite a bit, thankfully, but still 40 years later, we're really realizing that half of your diet should be, fruits and veggies. And even, this is even shifted in 10 years. So they're even saying this, we really need to be careful, and the meats and this forth. So it's interesting that the food industry, remember there's a lot of the food industry and the recommendations are sometimes politically driven as well. So it's important to know, kind of what we should be getting nutrition-wise. This is the most recent healthy eating plate, and this is what I would tell kids in clinic. So, we would discuss what should you be eating. It really should be healthy protein, whole grains, vegetables and fruit, water, and dairy is not part of, it's not necessary. And so, when I was younger, I think a quarter of this plate, they told us had to be dairy. And the milk industry, the dairy industry has done a lot of marketing. And I'm not trying to say, dairy is evil or bad, but we should really look at, there are healthier ways of getting calcium, protein, and so forth. And here's another one. This is more what our plate should look like. I mean, this looks fabulous, colorful, eating a rainbow, but not, we don't, this is not traditionally what we see and what's kind of popular in American culture. So what can we do? So I think what I tell my kids, so one of the things I think the biggest thing is just becoming educated. So, picking whole foods instead of, apple juice, which is significantly processed, pick the whole apple. Instead of, trying to add spinach, trying to add greens into anything you can. I think it's tough when people feel like, there's a tremendous amount of joy that comes from eating. And I really want people to still have that joy. So it shouldn't be, in the beginning about taking things away. It's about adding. So think of ways of adding, omega-3s, adding, chia seeds, flax seeds, adding spinach, adding some greens into what you're eating. I tell patients, add 1 serving of fruit to lunch, and try to add 2 servings of vegetables. Add a handful of walnuts to something you're eating. So those are great ways. I can't stress this enough, learning to read labels and be educated. I try to empower my own kids, so learning, becoming detectives and looking at, what are names for hidden sugar? When they're adding brown molasses, obviously high fructose corn syrup, everybody's familiar with, but there's so many sweeteners that are put into foods. Reading natural sugar versus added sugar, learning to read all the ingredients in food. Decrease or limiting your dairy intake. So here's another one that I like to mention. Soybeans are very, very high in calcium. Broccoli's high in calcium. Actually, the leafy greens are really high in calcium. So a common myth is you have to consume milk or dairy, like I said, to meet calcium needs, which is not true. This is actually really interesting. I like to tell people that, remember, plants are actually the original source of calcium. The other people that, when we're getting milk from cows, it's the cows that are eating the grains, and that's how we're getting the calcium. I mean, the milk inherently has some calcium, but remember, the soil is how what provides that rich calcium to the plants. Another thing, so this might be a little bit blurry, but this is another good example. So when you're reading, two types of breakfast options, right? So you look at a plain bagel versus oats. So remember, I try to think about, how processed or how many steps away is it from the whole food. So steel cut oats, they're actually, that's closest to the actual oat grain, whereas a bagel is obviously things that it's processed, it's been, kind of broken down, the grain, and then made into the dough and cooked as a bagel. And so when you compare, you're looking for nutrient dense foods. So you're looking for, and I don't necessarily recommend, unless people are on a weight loss regimen, to count calories, but really looking at high natural fiber, looking at nutrient dense, where you're getting a lot of grams of protein and fiber for the calories you're consuming. So I think some easy ways, some steps I would suggest adopting towards a plant-based diet, trying to add, so the recommendation is actually 5 servings of fruits and 5 servings of vegetables. I think people used to say 5 servings of total fruit and vegetables, but really trying to do that, and it's actually quite hard. Since obtaining my lifestyle certification, I have made it a point to make sure I do this. And I feel like the only way I can do that is if I honestly add a salad every day, because it's tough to, get all those vegetables and fruits in. One of the other huge things is that the Western diet has basically has an addiction to sweet taste. I think especially kids, and I think a lot of people, the United States is the only country worldwide that eats sweet breakfast. There was a study of all the breakfast that people eat in other countries. Like in India, people, you eat upma, you eat all sorts of savory sort of things with some grains in the morning, but only in the US, the breakfasts are like cereal, which is just laden with sugar, muffins, pancakes, breads, all of that. And so trying to, it takes about 12 to 16 weeks. Anywhere from 30 to 90 days to retrain your taste buds. So trying to use spices instead of sugar to really kind of open up that flavor. I really try to use things like cinnamon, vanilla, cardamom when I'm trying to emphasize something that may be sweet. Like if I make oatmeal, I will add a cinnamon stick or cloves or vanilla, and then using things like I'll keep ripe bananas, very ripe bananas, and I'll put them in the freezer and adding that to use the natural sweetness from the bananas, not adding any sugar. Finding ways to add omega-3s. So omega-3s are shown to really help your body fight sort of any of the free radicals and just kind of keep your body immune-wise healthy. So we have bags of chia seeds and flax seeds and nuts. So these are the best ways we can add omega-3 into your diet. The other thing is drinking enough water throughout the day. So many of us, many people do not get enough water. Roughly there's you're supposed to divide, I think there's an algorithm, something like 2 times your weight in pounds. Let me think of this. I think it's like, it's something like divided by 8 or something, but it's basically, it's aimed for 8 glasses of 8 ounces. As an adult, that's what you should be aiming for. And kids should be having 5 or 6 glasses a day. So we talked about that, eating whole grains instead of processed foods. If you guys have any questions along the way, I'm happy to take questions. Anyone have anything about diet? And we can wrap all this up, all the pillars. But I think the whole foods plant-based one is so important, and it can be overwhelming. So I think the first step is to take a look at your own diet and where are places that you maybe you're not happy or satisfied. First of all, you can look, do you get 5 servings of vegetables a day? Are you getting 5 servings of fruit a day? Are there high fat, maybe high calorie items that you can decrease or substitute with something else? And so really, first of all, scrutinizing your own diet and looking at it is the first step, what I tell people. The next step is physical activity. So this is really interesting. So this is the effect on physical activity on your health. And if you look at this, this is amazing. Look at this. So this is, oh my gosh, my y-axis cut off, my fault. This is when you try to do a fancy PowerPoint. So this is actually your mortality, right? So what your end stage, you know, kind of how people do. So it's, wait, let me make sure, is that what it is? It's, I think it is it's kind of your, actually, let me think. It's actually how fit you are and how safe you are from having medical issues. So if you look at it, people who aren't doing any, you know, have no protective effort of what they're doing. And so this is kind of your protective tendency to getting chronic diseases and illnesses. And so what they looked at is even people who walk, just walking every day. So the more you walk, it really has a huge benefit in your decrease in your overall, you know, mortality and health. And so that's why this is kind of where the recommendation comes from. They saw that people who did really vigorous activity, they really see a big benefit in their health. But, you know, after a while, they saw that once you get past, you know, kind of significant amount of activity, there's really not that much gain. So this is really important to know that physical activity has a huge impact on our health. Many of us, especially now in COVID, people have been working from home, they're sedentary, and there's a lot of studies showing the negative effects of being sedentary. So we're seeing a lot of central obesity. Just being sedentary itself is actually directly related to increased risk of colon cancer, your metabolism. You can have high blood sugar, it increases your blood pressure, and your body just is not functioning as well. So even, you know, people that have, you know, jobs where they're sitting or sedentary, even getting up every hour for 2 minutes or even getting up every couple hours for a 10-minute break is enough to stimulate your metabolism. This is the physical activity recommendation for different groups. So, you know, another thing actually that personally concerns me as a pediatrician, all these kids, I mean, mine included, my kids have been at home all year, you know, for kids ages 6 to 17, the recommendation is 60 minutes from the American Pediatrics Society, I mean, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and in general, they should be having 1 hour daily of moderate to vigorous exercise. And many of these kids actually are not getting it. In addition to that, all of us actually should have activities where we are strengthening our muscles and bones. So as we look, as we all are in this age group, the recommendation is at least 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity walking. I mean, activities such as brisk walking. And then separate from that, you should have 2 days a week of strengthening muscles. And then in older individuals, it's actually really, really important to incorporate activities of balance because as you get older, there's an increased risk of falling and balance becomes really, really pivotal. So are we meeting these guidelines? So 150 minutes a week, that's like what, half an hour, 5 days a week. You know, sadly, people are not, you know, there's only less than 5% of individuals are able to do 30 minutes of physical activity a day, which is sort of staggering, right? I mean, I know this cartoon's kind of funny, but it's crazy. And I think that we just are so busy that it becomes very tough to form that habit of physical activity. So why does this not happen? I think many of us feel like we don't have enough time. You know, exercising takes this whole, like, okay, I got to go change, I have to work out, and then I'm going to have to do this, or I have to make dinner. Or maybe you feel out of shape. You feel like, where are you going to start? People think that you have to join a gym. You know, one of the things that was really fascinating that I learned from my lifestyle medicine certification, studies have shown that even the minimum amount of exercise burst, 10 minutes of exercise, is sufficient to stimulate your body and have it be significant. So actually, I'll even tell you that when I started doing this training, I thought, you know what, it's easy. Anybody can take out 10 minutes. So I started, you know, I would get busy and I said, okay, I'm going to go do 10 minutes, I'm going to at least go for a walk, go do something. And, oftentimes what happens when you say, okay, I'm just going to do it for 10 minutes, once you start, I think the rate limiting step is always just putting on those shoes or just starting your exercise. I think once we start, we often are happy, you can go. But honestly, there are times when I've broken up, kind of just exercising or just being active in 10, 15-minute spurts. And so if you do it, I do it early in the morning, and then I take my kids, I make them go walk on a lunch break. And so there are many, many ways, or in the evening doing things. So it's important to not feel like you have to have this 1 hour workout. I think that becomes sometimes in people's minds that limits them from maybe perhaps exercising. I think people tend to think that they need to run or do something that's very difficult. And I often remind people that you can start with just walking down the block. Walking first, we recommend 5 minutes, starting 5 minutes and then adding on 5 minutes. And you can just gradually do that, 3 days a week and just starting. And then obviously there's many, many things you can do at home, even things like chores, running, dancing, playing with the kids. Any of this can be physical activity. So I like to call it physical activity versus exercise, because I think people sometimes feel like exercising seems a little bit daunting. So what is moderate intensive activity? So moderate activity is that you're working hard enough that you can still talk, but you're not able to sing. So that's, I think that's a good way to kind of know what's moderate. I mean, you can actually check your heart rate. And if your heart rate is in, you can figure out your maximum heart rate. And if it's in kind of halfway there, that's moderate activity. So what are examples of, moderate activity? Walking, brisk walking, water aerobics, riding bikes, playing tennis, pushing a lawnmower. Then what's vigorous activity? So this is where you definitely cannot sing and you can barely talk. You can only say a few words. So this is really that vigorous intensity working, running, really swimming laps, riding bikes fast, really playing difficult tennis, anything that really you're kind of winded and you have to pause to breathe or talk. So it doesn't matter what you do. Even light activity is better than being sedentary. So remember I mentioned that you need to have 150 minutes of moderate vigor or moderate activity, or 75 minutes of vigorous, and then the muscle strengthening. So this is really, really important actually, that the better you strengthen your muscles, the more you'll get out of your physical activity. And actually it helps your metabolism, it helps your core strength. So I think a lot of people also feel a little intimidated by lifting weights, but it's very easy. You can use, bands, you can do any kind of resistance training, even, many forms of yoga. Yoga itself is an amazing muscle strengthening. So any of these that you do that really strengthens your muscles, and it should be done, it can be done on the same or different days of when you're walking or doing your other activities. So as I mentioned, a repetition is when you do a complete, like if you're going to do a whole, you're going to do your biceps. So it's an entire, one. And it's funny, I got my mom some weights and I'm having her do some balancing things. And so she's never lifted weights in her life. So I got her 5-pound dumbbells and telling her to do kind of, reps of 8 or 10, starting with whatever she can. Actually, I started her with 5 to 7 initially. And then the key is that you're doing enough when you can't do one more little set. So you feel fatigued. And so, it's really, really important, because the better our muscles are strengthened, that the stronger we are, and actually the better your body's able to, burn and function otherwise. So like I said, examples of muscle strengthening: lifting weights, resistant bands, even things like push-ups and sit-ups, gardening, and then yoga. So these are all great examples of muscle strengthening. So as I mentioned, so there's moderate and vigorous activity. As I also said, the guidelines are at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity. The guidelines are, so that's like actually for weight maintenance. So this is not to lose weight. This is actually just to be healthy and take good care of ourselves. If you are wanting to lose weight, then we recommend doing 300 minutes of moderate activity a week. So that would be like, an hour a day for 5 days, which is really feasible. Or you can do 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous activity. Or you can even mix it up. Like I like to run 1 or 2 days a week, which would be my vigorous activity. I like to do yoga a couple of days a week. And then, or I'll do, kind of walk with the kids and things like that. So, and if you are able to work with, a physical therapist, if you have kind of, knee injuries or hip issues, you really should find a safe way that you're not straining, or, you should never be in pain as you do any of these activities. That's why walking is literally the best form of physical activity, or yoga, which is wonderful. So activity type, this is, aerobic, endurance, strength, flexibility, balance. One thing I really, really like is this acronym, it's SMART. So I would recommend all of you guys to really look at this in any goal that you have. So every goal, you can't just say, I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to work out. It's really, really important that we need specific goals. So it stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time connected. So with this, what do you really want to do? How many sessions? And then we have to be, look at, like, do you have what it takes? So let's say you're going to walk. Okay, I'm going to walk 30 minutes every day after I get home from work. But then, realistically, that's when the kids have homework, you're prepping for dinner. If it's not going to be realistically done, or you don't have someone who's going to, take over dinner 2 days a week, so you can really focus on walking, or you're going to do it early in the morning, but you really can never wake up because you go to bed so late. So really looking at your own schedule and figuring out what will work, and how can people who support you help you get this activity, finding a friend to exercise with you, or your kids, or not a time when is stressful, that would be difficult, and you'll find yourself saying, no, I can't do it, it's not going to work. So, my daughter Ujala was supposed to help me do this, where it comes out separately, but that's okay. So I thought this was, I thought it was insane. There was this statistic that there's just simple 4 recommendations: eating 5 servings of fruit and veggies, maintaining a healthy weight, not smoking, and moderate activity, 150 minutes a week. What percent of Americans are able to do all 4 things? And you can think about whether you yourself do all 4 things. It's a staggering 4%, which is crazy, that it's so difficult for people to just have the time to do these basic things that are so important for your health. In fact, they say that doing these 4 things alone will decrease your risk for chronic diseases by tenfold, which is incredible. So, okay, pillar 3. I won't get too much into this, since we have a talk on sleep next week. But they recommend we sleep 7 to 9 hours. That's the American Academy of Sleep that recommends that. But so many Americans get way less than 7 hours, and we all know why. Look at this poor lady, stressed. She has coffee there and she's still asleep. People are drinking caffeine from when they wake up to at night to stay up. Our devices and phones are constant stimulation, and really a hindrance and detriment to good sleep. Oftentimes, sleep is not made a priority. It's often like, oh, I only got 4 hours of sleep and I'm running on 5 hours of sleep. It's held as a badge of I don't need sleep, but in fact, that's actually a fallacy. Everybody, your brain, your body, everything needs sleep. And so, and especially actually teenagers, they'll pull all-nighters, they'll stay up late, and then they're sleeping till 2 p.m. on the weekends, so they're playing catch up. That's not really good. You really should not have more than 1 hour difference in your natural wake-up time between weekends and weekdays. And then people who are eating late at night, if you're drinking alcohol, all of these things mess with your sleep. So what are the effects of lack of sleep besides being a zombie the next day? There's a lot of studies showing that sleep deprivation has significant effects on our body. there's actually two hormones, ghrelin and leptin. And ghrelin helps to keep your appetite in check. Well, they've seen that people that are sleep deprived, your hormone that keeps your appetite in check is not secreted as much, so they end up overeating. So it's shown that people that don't get enough sleep consume more calories. Obviously fatigue, there's increase in anxiety, depression. We've also seen that, and you know this, if you haven't gotten enough sleep, your memory, your thinking is off. But it really does, it increases your risk for diabetes. There have been tons of studies that it interferes with your insulin level, and how sensitive your insulin is getting blood sugar. So that's really important as well. So what can you do for sleep? So things like not eating close to bedtime, our screens, everything really should be off 2 hours before your bedtime. You should have a set bedtime. Generally people, 9 to 10 o'clock is our normal circadian rhythm. But if you sort of kind of get that second wind and you're on your computer and doing things, you'll often find that you're now awake and it's like 11:30. So it's really important to kind of calm our minds and calm our bodies, and getting ready for sleep. So caffeine, stress, temperature, one of the biggest things, and I don't want to go into sleep too much, but getting midday sun, like going for a walk at lunch, is amazing for good nighttime sleep. So that much daily normal sun is really good for your own circadian rhythm and to help you wind down. So those who are having problems sleeping at night, one of the best things besides, stopping drinking caffeine and not eating late at night is going for, a walk, like right now or an hour earlier. So those are some sleep benefits. These are some of the other ones. So, avoiding high sodium foods, staying hydrated, actually water. And I mean, the two things, if you just drank a lot of water and then remember to get a good sunlight exposure, at least 15, 20 minutes around midday sun, which is really, really important. So same thing with the SMART goals. So specific. First, look at your own sleep. Are you happy? Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep? Do you wake up feeling rested? Do you have less than 1 hour difference between your weekday and weekend wake up time? And if not, you should look at it. So what is it? How do you want to improve your sleep? Are you waking up a lot at night, or are you not getting enough sleep? And then thinking, looking at some of these, what do you need to do? What sort of tips do you need to look at? And how long you can commit to it. And then these are sort of the recommendations for optimal sleep. So most adults should be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep in 24 hours. So pillar number 4, managing stress. So, no surprise that a significant number of people in the US experience physical symptoms of stress. So either, headache or stomach ache, or, feeling nauseous. And then, many people suffer psychological symptoms of stress, feeling really worried and fearful and sad. And so this is really, and especially in the pandemic and our current state of affairs, stress is inevitable. So it's not something we can avoid. There's always going to be concerns about jobs, our future, our health, our kids, money. But the key is figuring out how to look at that stress, how to approach it, and how to separate ourselves from it. Again, without saying it's same sort of effects, it increases our stress hormone called cortisol, which can increase your blood pressure and your blood sugar. It causes poor sleep. People often overeat. It's directly related to heart disease, and it takes a toll in our relationships. In the same way we spend too much time, a lot of people, especially actually young people, are spending more time on social media when they're stressed instead of actually, connecting, consuming significant caffeine, other mechanisms. So, these are ways where things like getting involved, doing something, that you can, the stress can be maybe there, but that does something that you have some positive way of dealing with it. Music, exercise, dance, yoga, doing something creative. Often many of us think crafting and doing arts and crafts are for kids. And in fact, actually, all people should have some time for free play. Play is not just playing what little kids do. Adults need playtime, which is something fun and engaging you're doing. trying breathing, making time for things that make you laugh, and trying a journal, or looking into some, spiritual needs. So these are all important ways for stress reduction. And then, like I was saying, so, not all stress is bad. Some good stress keeps us going. But I think a lot of this, and this one is a little bit tougher to do, but really takes, again, our smart looking at, are you comfortable? What do you think of your stress level? Is it a lot? Is it manageable? Are you managing it? Okay, are you feeling overwhelmed? And so really thinking about what is a good way to cope with it, how much time you have, who can help you with it, and how long you want to work on it. Okay, so pillar number 5, social connections. So I don't know if any of you have heard of this book, The Blue Zones Project, which is fascinating. It's a concept where they studied these certain cities in Okinawa and Sardinia, Italy, Loma Linda, U.S., Nicoya, Costa Rica, and I guess Akaria, Greece, where they saw that people lived the longest, like well into their 90s, and they were the happiest. And there were groups of people that just were so happy, lived long, didn't have stress, and they saw many things in common. And a lot of the things in common are these pillars of lifestyle medicine, kind of really whole food, plant-based diet, not smoking, eating lots of legumes, moderate physical activity. But a huge thing was a lot of social engagement and family. It's the power of belonging, being in a part of a community, either through your religion or culture, where we focus this. And this is something that I think in the Western world has separated a little bit, but the power of connection is not something that's really studied. It wasn't taught in medical school, but I think is so important to good health. So again, well, right now we're not connecting because of COVID, but in general, people are too busy. They're overscheduled. A lot of teenagers, they think they're connecting on, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, but it's not really making, true connections. They think that during tough times, we have this, Western view of thinking that you have to work on things their own, or someone's going through a tough time, you give them their space. And that's really not what people, that's not what a lot of these traditional blue zone concepts, and even our Indian culture, that's not really what we do. You're together, right? And so that connection element is so important. A lot of here in Western culture, it's a very nuclear family that's isolated, which makes this component lacking. So these things are finding connections, to finding groups, volunteering, finding a community resource, just finding something that brings you joy. That's important that you do. And I think for, especially for women, for moms, a lot of it we're doing that's for our kids, but I think it's very, very important to find something that you connect with, and making some time for that connection outside of your children, and finding something that connects and resonates with yourself. And that is such a huge, that's been shown actually to improve blood pressure, things of anxiety, depression, blood sugar, all of these things. Some more about, social connections. So same thing, those goals. Do you feel connected? What can you do? Okay, the last but not least, avoiding risky substances. And I probably won't go through some of these details, but some of this, tobacco is the #1 cause of death. Sadly, I was going to say interesting, but it's sort of sad. It's about to move to #2, and what's replacing tobacco? It's sedentary lifestyle. So inactivity is soon to replace tobacco for the #1 leading cause of death, which is actually just heartbreaking. So, but tobacco is connected to heart disease, lung cancer, esophageal cancer, and something that is crazy. It was a huge peak in the 80s and 90s of tobacco use, and I think with all the campaigning, it's come down. But recently, with this whole e-cigarettes and vaping, there's actually, sadly, I think this is my next slide, there's actually been a huge increase in the use of tobacco by teens, which is not the direction we want to go. A lot of marketing by e-cigarettes, But there's so much nicotine in these sort of vaping and these cigarettes, which is really bad. So it's actually gone up in 2018. Alcohol. So it's the U.S. and the relationship with alcohol is a little bit it's interesting. There is a significant amount of drinking. 86% of people 18 and older that have drank, 70% say they have drank in the past year, and more than half of women and men reported they've drank in the last month. Not only that, that's one thing, but the amount of kids, people ages 12 and older, this is according to the National State of Drinking, and they've noticed that 14.5 million people have an alcohol use disorder, which is crazy. And I won't go too much into these, but it's definitely an issue and a huge problem in this country. So 25% of people that have engaged in binge drinking and really, really heavy alcohol use. There's actually people that are high intensity drinking that end up in the emergency room. These numbers have gone up. And I'll tell you, in COVID, drug and alcohol use has skyrocketed, sadly. As you may know, the effects of alcohol on our body, liver, cirrhosis, it increases your blood sugar, obesity, addiction, cancer. A lot of it, there's a lot of studies, all Mediterranean diet, wine is helpful, wine is safe. There really is no safe amount of alcohol. Does this mean that no one should ever have anything? That's not to say, but it's really important to know that there is no clear amount that is determined to be safe. The definition of moderate drinking is more than 2 drinks for men a day and greater than 1 drink for a woman a day. So, in the college campuses and a lot of the social scene, it's all around alcohol. So it's really, really important. The fact that it's legal, easy to get, anybody can have, it's a huge problem that needs a whole separate, addressing. Oh gosh, I forgot to enlarge this. So same thing. These are actually, hold on, do I have the next slide that has it bigger? Yes, okay. So this is sort of a low risk drinking, and this is the guidelines of what constitutes what's 1 drink. So, 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, 1.5 ounces of actual liquor, 80 proof spirits. So it's important to, kind of just be aware. I think the biggest issue actually becomes with teens and young people. And so just being mindful of that. And then actually I wanted to make sure we have some time for questions. So this is just an overall kind of, let me see, I didn't get a chance to, there we go, okay. Oh, that came up a little bit blurry. So this is, this came up a little bit blurry, but it talks about how to get started on a whole foods, plant-based diet. And then this is kind of how to optimize your immune system. So all the things we talked about, diet, moving, being connected, sleeping, not smoking, and managing our stress. So that's kind of all I have for now. I hope that was helpful. I'll go ahead and stop sharing so you guys I can see you guys. Oh, here there, chat. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Any questions, comments, anything related or unrelated to these particular things?
Hi, Sharvari, this is Seema. This was very, very good presentation. It's reinforcing all the things that we know, yet it's so hard to implement. I can speak that for myself. So my question actually is with regards to what your plate should look like, right? You shared with a picture, and with our Indian culture, it's really difficult to incorporate that. And, you do roti, dal, or, other kinds of things, even quinoa or other types of legumes. If you were to give some examples on how to manage that and how many calories of each of those you should incorporate in each meal in order to manage your portion size, as well as, to have a well-balanced meal each time. That's what I struggle with.
No, and that's an excellent question. Now, I'm not sure about the caloric intake, and that's the other thing. There's not like easily available calorie amounts for
Right.
Indian foods, right? I think the issue becomes, right, because in India, people eat roti, people eat rice. I mean, they're okay. So it's our portion size, right? And so the amount of what we eat, I think it's kind of being mindful, like you said, when you things like when you have khichdi, you don't have to use white rice, substituting quinoa, using brown rice, finding ways of you can introduce more kind of lentils and pulses into that. I wouldn't say a normal caloric amount. It really depends on each person's sort of medical kind of condition. But I think I try to have my dal be thicker. And remember, I mean, to get 18 grams of protein, you have 1 cup of dal. There is no way.
Right.
I mean, right. And so, people, I got into this argument or not argument, discussion with somebody who was like, oh, really? You think dal is so high in protein? You know how much you have to take? That's true. But I always make the point that we don't need as much protein as always touted. But I think the biggest thing with our diets is just really having the majority of it, with how much oil right? There's some of the subsies and vegetables are so oily. So making sure you're using less oil, using more of the spices, trying to have, like, we'll make, anything. I try to have like roti. If we're going to have roti, then I'll have like brown rice, or we'll try to pick one or the other. And oftentimes, like, you don't even need the rice with the dal. So we'll just have
True. Just dal by itself, yeah. And
like limiting potatoes, right? Potatoes are not that, like, everything is like potatoes. Like the kids will, when they're really young, they'd only have potato sabji. So you're always making, but finding things of like okra. Like I've actually made, when you make something with spinach, blending in kale, collard greens. So finding ways of doing things like that. Things like we'll have I guess this is not Gujarati. I always thought it was Gujarati, but I guess it's Maharashtra, like that, like pav bhaji. But
yes,
putting in every vegetable,
everything together.
Really limiting potatoes, putting in greens where they wouldn't think, like we grew, we had some radish, and using the greens of the radish and using, I agree, it's tough,
And also with five servings of vegetables and fruits and nuts, and all of a sudden you find yourself, you're eating a lot of calories, like a lot more, even if you're having 2 or 3 nuts, or half an apple. And also it also is one of those things, it also has to be satiating. So
that's actually a good. So what happens is, what you're saying is that just eating fruits and vegetables in itself is not as filling. So one thing I do is, like, at least 3 days a week, I'll just start cooking beans. So I'll soak beans overnight. So pinto beans or black beans or any beans. There has to be some sort of pulse or lentils to get enough protein, right?
yes.
I'll add things like healthy fats, like avocados. And remember, you don't want too many nuts. Can be a lot of calories and a lot of fats, but good ways to add substance, like sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are healthier than potatoes. So if I make a salad, like, I'll still be hungry. So if I make a salad, then I soak beans overnight, and then I pressure cook them. And so then I'll just season them a little bit. And so I have beans or some sweet potato or avocado in my salad that helps to fill me up,
No, thank you so much. It's the tips I wanted to gain, see how you all manage, and each and every day, you want variety too. That's also the key. And then to be able to, it's also the mindset. It's going towards that mindset, to be able to get away from complete meal as we are used to. So no, thank you so much. This is amazing.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharvari. That was really, really very good, and so many good points that you made. And the statistics, I was really not aware of all the numbers that you quoted in terms of sedentary lifestyle. And
I could do a whole hour on the sedentary lifestyle. I feel very passionate about that. It's really, it's just so sad. It's disheartening.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure, of course.
I hope more people can benefit by, we've recorded, so we'll share it with more people.
Yes, that sounds good.
Thank you, Sharvari ji and
Okay.
Hegel ji.
Yes, thank you.
It was really very nice. Thank you.
Good, good. Good.
Can you also on the book that you mentioned, the Blue Zones?
Oh, yes. Oh, you would love it. You would love it, Devraj. It's awesome. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that is very, very important too. We also feel that being connected, being felt useful and connecting and giving back to the community is such an important aspect of it.
Yes, for sure.
Very nice, Sharvari.
Second.
All right.
So I'm gonna stop the recording.